The Galactic Dominion had seen many threats in its long-reign rebellions, its invasions, even black hole storms, but nothing like this. At the far edge of known space, beyond the last mapped star systems, an unknown armada appeared without warning. It came not through jump gates, not through wormholes, but as if emerging straight from the void itself. The fleet was made of matte black ships, smooth and silent, without a single light or signal. Dozens of them moved in perfect synchronization, like dancers on a cosmic stage. They did not broadcast any code, send any message, or respond to hails. The Dominion called them ghosts at first, thinking they were remnants of a lost civilization or a trick of sensors. But the readings were too real, too precise. Something was truly there, something powerful, inside the great crystal towers of Alyssa's Prime, where the Dominion kept its oldest records and forgotten truths. An alien historian named Varin worked in silence, while the rest of the galaxy grew restless. Panic had spread among the higher councils like wildfire after the Ghost Fleet's arrival. The fleet had not attacked, not spoken, not broken any treaty, but its mere presence unsettled the core of Dominion power. Experts argued about their origin, commanders debated strategies, and security protocols were updated across every system. Yet amid the chaos, Varian small, thin, with large amber eyes and for delicate arms, was more curious than afraid. He had studied hundreds of extinct civilizations, from sunburned worlds to those swallowed by their own machines, but one name had always puzzled him more than others: Earth, humanity, the Terrans. According to official history, they had been destroyed during the galactic culling nearly 800 years ago, wiped out, along with dozens of primitive species who had resisted early Dominion expansion. But something never felt right about that story. There were no solid records, no detailed battle reports, not even evidence of debris. It was like humanity had simply disappeared. So while the admirals and ministers focused on military responses, Varen slipped into the deepest levels of the Dominion's restricted archives, unlocking layers of data not accessed in centuries. He followed trails hidden within forgotten files, crossed references buried under false labels, and after several sleepless cycles, he found something strange: a sealed capsule record from the pre-culling era. It was a probe recovered from an uncharted sector 2 centuries ago, its contents never fully decoded. Inside was a message, written in ancient Terran symbols, and with the help of old translation matrices. Marine read it slowly. "If you find this, know that we've gone. Beyond the stars, we'll return when you've forgotten fear." The words sent a chill through him. It didn't sound like a warning or a threat. It sounded like a promise. And now, the fleet had come at, firing weapons, not conquering worlds, but disabling. Dominion satellites in outer sectors began going dark. Communications relays lost power. Border beacons shut down with no damage. Just silence. Patrol ships sent to investigate found their systems overwritten, weapons disabled and navigation reset, but crews unharmed. The actions were clean, exact, and strangely polite, like someone flicking off the lights in a room they no longer wanted disturbed. Nothing had been taken, nothing destroyed, just quiet corrections. To Varen, it felt like the fleet was testing the Dominion's memory, probing not defenses, but understanding. And the fleet's design matched old Terran ships almost perfectly, except they were sleeker, darker, more advanced, almost like shadows of their former selves. The thought troubled him. If the fleet truly was human in origin, then humanity had not been destroyed. It had hidden, changed, waited, but for what? And why return now? Varen submitted his findings to the council, but they dismissed him. They were too busy arguing whether the fleet should be labeled as hostile or unknown. Some believed it was a new artificial species, others claimed it was a lost experiment gone rogue. None wanted to accept the idea that humans had survived the culling and evolved into something so far beyond the current state of the galaxy. But deep inside, Varen knew. This wasn't just a military puzzle, it was history resurfacing, forgotten chapter returning to rewrite the story. He couldn't sleep as he studied more data. Ship signatures from the Ghost Fleet matched faint, Echo signals found on deep space scans over the past century, appearing briefly, then vanishing. It meant they had been watching for a long time. The fleet wasn't lost. It was waiting. Now that the Dominion had stretched itself thin with power and control, they had come. Not to take revenge, not to start war, but to remind. "We'll return when you've forgotten fear," Varian whispered the line over and over, realizing it wasn't a threat, but a condition. The Dominion, built on domination and force, had long replaced fear with arrogance. And now something ancient had returned to challenge that. As another outer station went dark, this time with the crew reporting a faint musical hum just before their systems shut off, Varian felt a mixture of awe and concern. The Ghost Fleet, if truly Terran, wasn't acting like any known species. Their technology, their silence, their precision, it was beyond AI, beyond logic. It was personal, but not cruel. Varian believed they were not here to conquer the Dominion. They were here to measure it, to test whether the galaxy had learned anything in their absence. And if not, perhaps the fleet had come to teach, quietly, without violence, but with certainty. In that realization, the historian knew that this was not just a rediscovery of an old race, it was the beginning of a new story. One that would either reshape the galaxy, or erase its memory of power forever. The Galactic Dominion had always believed in strength through fleets, through systems, through control of the stars, but now, for the first time in generations, their power felt hollow. After weeks of silence and observation from the mysterious Black Fleet, the Dominion's High Council finally approved a diplomatic mission. A sleek embassy ship, heavily guarded and equipped with translation systems, from over 500 known species, was sent to establish peaceful contact with the unknown Armada. It never returned. No distress signal, no trace, not even a ripple in space where it vanished. Just silence. The escorts reported no sign of trouble before losing all connection. And the incident sent a deep wave of fear through the Dominion. Even so, the fleet still did not fire a single weapon. It just continued hovering at the border of known space, unmoving but present, watching like a silent guardian or a silent judge. Then the quiet disruptions began. Border stations started powering down without warning, not destroyed just. Completely offline, systems turned cold, lights dimmed. No one was harmed. The crews remained unharmed, but helpless, locked out of their own technology. Their security panels, navigation controls, communication links simply stopped responding, like someone had reached into their systems and pressed an invisible reset switch. At first, the Dominion suspected sabotage, perhaps from within. But as more and more stations were affected across different sectors, the pattern became too precise to ignore. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just capable of disabling technology, was choosing what to shut down and when. The level of control was unnerving. It didn't feel like war. It felt like correction. A cold hand adjusting a machine that had started to spin too wildly. Inside the Dominion's science division, debates erupted about whether the Armada was biological, artificial, or something in between. No life signs had been detected, yet their movements weren't purely robotic. There was intent in how they acted, calculated, thoughtful, patient. Varian, the alien historian who had been studying ancient Earth records, was one of the few who saw the pattern for what it might be. He proposed a theory during a private council session. The fleet was human, but not in any form the galaxy currently understood. He believed that humanity had evolved beyond physical needs, beyond flesh and emotion, even beyond the limits of empire. What remained was a civilization so advanced it had stepped out of the cycle of conflict and expansion. They didn't conquer planets, they corrected problems. They didn't destroy threats, they removed the cause. The council laughed at him at first. He couldn't imagine humans on extinct, once chaotic race, being the force behind something so methodical and perfect. But Admiral Kazari, who had grown more cautious since the first encounter, asked a serious question. If this fleet truly was human, where was the humanity? Where was the anger, the fear, the communication? Where were the mistakes? In her view, this Armada lacked everything that made humans human. There was no passion, no diplomacy, just action without emotion. Varen listened calmly, his large eyes focused on her, and then replied in a low, steady voice, "Maybe they left those behind." The room went quiet. That thought settled into their minds like dust into stone. What if the humans hadn't been destroyed at all? What if they had left their old form behind, choosing logic over fear, purpose over conquest? What if they had chosen to become more than a species, more than a government? What if they had become a force? A quiet answer to a galaxy filled with noise. Admiral Kazari, known for her sharp mind and years of frontline command, found herself uncertain for the first time. The Dominion's usual tools, threats, fleets, diplomacy, were all useless against a force that didn't play by any known rules. The idea that the fleet could observe, disable, and even vanish entire missions without harm or explanation shook even her. She reviewed the records again and again, searching for patterns. She noticed that none of the shutdowns had occurred. On civilian stations, only military outposts, weapons platforms, and enforcement satellites had been affected. It wasn't random. It was intentional. They were being warned, but kindly. The humans, if that's what they truly were, weren't acting like a forgotten enemy. They were acting like teachers. Harsh ones, perhaps, but not cruel. The mystery grew heavier with each passing day. The Ghost Fleet never moved closer, but its shadow stretched farther. Across the Dominion, rumors spread among the people. Some feared invasion, others whispered of return. But many began to feel something unexpected: hope. Maybe the humans hadn't come to destroy the galaxy, but to fix it. Maybe they had waited, watching from the dark edges of space, waiting to see if the galaxy had grown wise, or just stronger. Varen believed they were here to hold a mirror to the Dominion, not to judge with fire but with silence, not to rewrite history but to remind it. And deep down he feared that if the Dominion didn't listen, the fleet might simply turn and disappear again, taking its answers with it. Not as a threat, but as a lesson lost. It happened without warning, after months of silence and observation. For so long the Ghost Fleet had remained motionless, dark against the stars, their smooth black holes reflecting nothing. No lights, no weapons, no messages, until one ship finally spoke. The transmission was brief, clear, and in flawless galactic standard. Only one sentence: Dominion instability detected. Initiating neutral oversight. The words rippled through every level of government like a storm through still water. High Council members scrambled to interpret the meaning. Was it a declaration of war? A coded message? Bluff? Some officials laughed nervously, thinking it was nothing more than a test. Others feared that neutral oversight was just a polite way of saying control. But before any decision could be made, fear tipped the scales. A Dominion warship stationed near the outer defense ring panicked. The captain, unsure of how to respond, and under pressure from superiors, gave the order to fire. It was not a full assault, just a warning volley of plasma bursts aimed near, not at the fleet. The response was immediate, yet strangely calm. Before the weapons fully discharged, the ship's systems shut down one by one. Lights dimmed, engines stopped. Weapons froze mid-sequence. Every command was ignored. Within moments, the massive cruiser, once a symbol of Dominion strength, drifted silently in space like a powerless relic. And something even more unexpected happened. 3 of the black ships broke formation and approached, not with weapons drawn, but with a strange, synchronized rhythm. They surrounded the warship, scanned it with beams that left no damage, and after a few minutes, its systems slowly returned to life, rebalanced, and completely functional. The crew, shaken but unharmed, was escorted back to Dominion territory, where they reported no threats, no communication, and no harm. Only a deep sense of being. ... watched. That single act changed everything. The message, once doubted, now carried weight. The Dominion began noticing subtle changes across its territories. Military factories reported quiet shutdowns, automated systems disabling themselves. Orbital defense grids stopped responding to aggressive command codes. forcing many sectors to rely on diplomatic engagement rather than threat. Yet no destruction followed. No cities were harmed, no leaders were captured. Instead, strange patterns emerged. On outer colony worlds once filled with unrest, violence began to drop. Black market routes collapsed not because of arrests, but because their data links vanished, smuggling vessels reported, being boarded by uncrewed probes that erased cargo logs and redirected their ships toward legal trade stations. In one sector, long at war with itself, the planetary networks suddenly synced with new energy balancing protocols, fixing power shortages that had lasted for decades. These weren't attacks, they were quiet corrections. The changes were not just technical. Borders softened. Blockades were lifted. Old treaties, once ignored, began to be respected, again not by command, but by invisible pressure. Trade flows improved as tariffs vanished mysteriously from digital ledgers. Resources started moving smoothly across regions that once fought endlessly for control. The Ghost Fleet had not taken power by force. It had taken the dysfunction and erased it, without firing a weapon, without removing a single leader. Instead of fear, a strange sense of balance spread. Some called it control, others peace. None could deny was that the Dominion's grip on power was changing, fading, where it had relied on conflict, and thriving, where it embraced cooperation. Admiral Kazari watched all of this unfold with a mix of disbelief and cautious respect. Had prepared for war, spent her life studying enemy tactics and invasion patterns. But nothing in her training matched what she now saw. This was not an invasion. It was guidance, unspoken, measured, absolute. She returned to her command deck each day, expecting an attack that never came. Instead, the stars remained quiet, and the black ships remained at the edges of space, present, but never pushing forward. When asked by the Council whether humanity had returned to reclaim its place in the galaxy, Varen, the historian, gave a different answer. No, they've returned to remind us what place we were supposed to build. His theory grew stronger by the day. He believed that humanity, having left behind its biological form, had become something else, an evolved civilization with no need for territory or praise. A civilization that no longer saw power as something to hold, but as something to fix. When broken, they had observed, waited, and now they had intervened not to destroy, but to restore balance to a system on the edge of collapse. The phrase neutral oversight had once sounded like a threat. Now it sounded like a responsibility, a self-appointed one, chosen not out of pride but out of purpose. No Dominion leader dared to confront them again. Attempts to track their communication. Systems failed. Efforts to hack their signal architecture were gently rejected, not by counterattacks, but by quiet shutdowns of research facilities attempting intrusion. It became clear you could not fight them because they were not fighting back. You could not negotiate with them because they had already made their decision. Humanity had returned not with warships, but with resolve. It's not to lead the galaxy, but to guide it when it strayed too far from reason. And now, under the gaze of that silent fleet, the Dominion had no choice but to change, or be changed. Admiral Kazari had faced many unknowns in her long service to the Galactic Dominion, but nothing like this invitation, or perhaps a summons, from the mysterious fleet itself. The message arrived in the form of coordinates and a time, nothing more. The Dominion debated for days whether it was a trap, but Kazari had made her decision within minutes. She requested that Varen, the historian who had uncovered the truth behind the fleet's origins, join her. Together, they traveled in a small diplomatic vessel, with no escorts, no weapons armed, and no demands. As their ship approached the edge of the silent fleet, a single black vessel opened its structure like a blooming flower, revealing an entry corridor glowing with soft silver light. Their ship was guided in by unseen forces, landing smoothly without contact. When they stepped out, they expected guards, perhaps strange beings or machines, but found no one. The inside of the ship was quiet and vast, with walls that shimmered like liquid metal and a floor that responded softly to their steps. The silence was not empty. It was watchful, almost thoughtful. Then, in the heart of the ship, a projection appeared, not a screen, not a hologram, but a presence, tall and human in shape, its features calm and ageless. It did not introduce itself. It did not ask questions. It simply began to speak, and the voice was gentle, like distant thunder softened. By time, it explained that humans had not been defeated or destroyed 8 centuries ago. They had chosen to live not to escape, but to grow beyond the chaos of competition and expansion. They had realized that progress without ethics, power without responsibility, was only another form of collapse. So, they stepped away from the galactic stage not to hide, but to evolve. Not in terms of weapons or machines, but in thought, in purpose. They had become something more than a species. They had become a presence, one that watched, remembered, and only returned when the galaxy forgot what it meant to live in balance. Kesari, who had trained all her life to deal with conflict and control, stood frozen. Varen, ever the seeker of forgotten truths, listened with silent awe. The projection continued, saying they now appeared only at critical moments when a civilization's power had grown faster than its wisdom. At such tipping points, they came not to conquer, but to guide. They did not force change, but they did not allow collapse. They were observers, correctors, and when necessary, quiet protectors of a balance that most had forgotten ever existed. Then the figure said something that neither Kazari nor Varen would ever forget. You feared our return. That was wise. But fear is not our weapon. Fear is your mirror. In that single sentence, Kazari saw the truth. The Dominion's greatest threat had never been an enemy, but its own arrogance. Its belief that fear could be controlled, that it could be shaped into obedience. But fear, when ignored, became a shadow of everything a civilization refused to face. And the fleet this evolved humanity was that mirror, held silently in the stars, until the Dominion had no choice but to look. The projection then faded, and no further answers were given. No tour of the ship, no list of demands, no alliance. It was simply over. The light dimmed, and their ship was gently guided out once more. Kesari and Varen returned to the Dominion. Space, with no souvenirs, no evidence, only what they had seen and heard. Most of the High Council refused to believe their report. Some called it myth, others a manipulation. But Varen knew better. He wrote a new archive, not a record of battle or victory, but of understanding. In it, he wrote that humanity had not vanished in the culling they had transformed, that they had not retreated from the stars they had risen above them. And now, they were not kings or conquerors, but something else entirely. The quiet architects of balance in a galaxy that had forgotten what harmony meant. Across Dominion, space, subtle shifts continued. People began to speak of the Ghost Fleet not with fear, but with respect. Trade continued to thrive, corruption began to decline, and the harsh enforcement policies of the past grew weaker in favor of diplomacy and cooperation. No orders were given, no rules announced. But somehow, the Dominion began to correct itself, almost as if being silently watched was enough. Varian's words spread slowly, not as law, but as legend. A new myth was born, not of war and fire, but of return and reflection. The story of a species that had gone beyond the stars, only to return not with thunder, but with truth. And in the quiet of space, the Ghost Fleet remained still, waiting, patient. Watching for the next time power forgot the wisdom that must hold it. Waiting for the next mirror to be held up to a civilization lost in its own reflection.